Okay. Good morning, everyone. This meeting and all our meetings for the year 2022 have been subsidized by the following premium sponsors: Louis Joes Villiers Avalon Law Firm, Covanter Energy, National Grid, Gershow Recycling, and the Henry Schein Company, as well as the Long Island Labor Council. I will be hosting this event, and Lynn Nielsen and Franklin Bergeau will be the technical operators. We will begin with our national anthem selection that Frank has selected. With us today are our board members. The speaker is Julie Lutz, and I expect that Fred Joes and Lisa Kerr will be with us as well. All participants will be muted except the speaker and staff. Later in the program, the audience will be asked to participate in the conversation. The next meeting we have is 3 weeks from today, and it will take place at the Caithness plant in Yaphank, and you will be getting details of that in our newsletter. So, Frank, will you please start with the national anthem?
Yeah.
Very nice. Good selection, Frank. As always, you do a great job on that. And let me see, we're going to, I want to introduce our speaker. Our speaker is one of our board members, and as a matter of fact, she's in public education with the BOCES organization. She's the chief operating officer there and has been for the last several years. And she has brought to our attention some issues that we felt that we'd like to air. So I'd like to introduce Julie, and you'll have about 15 minutes before we start interrupting, and then we'll open it up to the audience eventually. So please welcome her, and Julie, you may begin.
Julie's.
Yep, you can hear me.
Good.
Can you give me permission to share screen? Whoever has control of that.
Yeah.
Lynn, you doing that?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Do you know where it is? Quick.
If you go down to share screen at the bottom of yours.
Yeah.
Click on that. Should be multiple.
Multiple participants. There you go. Done.
Okay. Can you all see that?
Yep, you got
Yes,
it.
ma'am.
Okay, so I will say I could not remember how much time I had to speak. So interrupt whenever you want, but I have.
What's your opening remarks? Because it might be okay to go to 20 to 25.
Okay, so I'll flip through this, but I will give you then the presentation so that you can post it wherever you want to post it. And is that a better view for you? Okay.
That's great.
So let me just move through on this. So public education, why it matters. And by the way, I appreciate the fact that the national anthem was the National Youth Orchestra, really appropriate when we're talking about public education. You know, and some folks in the business world might wonder, why as a business association are we talking about public education? As somebody who spent the last 37 years in that field, one main reason, right, is it prepares our next generation for college, for work, for the world. Public education, unlike some other entities, educates all students. Public education on Long Island happens to be one of the things that draws people to Long Island. And for all of us who are taxpayers, it impacts our home values. And most of us who live here would say, you know, positively for some communities, but certainly hits our wallets for all communities. So just brief overview, I'm going to talk about some key demographic and need shifts in our schools on Long Island, talk about some student outcomes, and then talk about costs of education on Long Island, which we all know are extremely high. I'm going to go through these quickly, but if you want to look at the, you know, the presentation further, you'll be able to see. But one of the things I do for public education on Long Island is look at demographics and present it frequently to our elected officials and our constituents. So this is Suffolk County school districts. This is enrollment change over the last 10 years. You can see across the bottom all of the school districts in Suffolk County, and you can see the vast majority of those districts have lost a tremendous amount of enrollment. However, there are some districts that have gained a tremendous amount of enrollment in that time, namely districts like Brentwood, Central Islip, Wyandanch, Riverhead, right? Districts where the types of students who are moving in look different than the types of students that are moving out of districts like Half Hollow Hills, Sachem, Smithtown. So we've had about a 12% decrease in enrollment, which is similar to what has happened across the rest of the state. However, slightly different than Nassau County. Nassau County, similar pattern, but even though they've lost enrollment, they've lost it at a rate of a little over 5% in the last 10 years. So again, losing enrollment, but not at the same rate as Suffolk, nor as the rest of the state. Let's also take a look at shifting demographics, right? One of the things we look at in public education is the wealth of the students or the needs of the students who come to us. And one of those measures is what we call economically disadvantaged. So this is from 2012 to 2020. The percentage of students in Long Island schools who qualify as economically disadvantaged, as you can see, those lines, the green line being Suffolk, the blue line being all of Long Island, and the orange line being Nassau. Those numbers have gone up slowly but steadily. These are change numbers for economically disadvantaged. So as you can see, almost all school districts in the last 7 or 8 years have seen an increase in the number of students who are economically disadvantaged. So even the wealthy school districts are seeing more students who fall into this. You can see some of them. I mean, Brentwood had in excess of 3,000 additional students who qualify as economically disadvantaged in that time frame. Suffolk County as a county has seen a 27.4% increase. Compared to the rest of the state that has seen a 6% increase. We do a lot of comparing our numbers to the rest of the state just to see what our shifts are looking like compared to the rest of New York State. This is Nassau County, economically disadvantaged. Again, most Nassau districts have seen an increase, not all. There are a couple of districts way over on the right that actually have seen a decrease in economically disadvantaged students. But again, this is something that is impacting almost all districts across Long Island. Nassau County also has seen a 27% increase in the students compared to 6.1% in the rest of the state. This is just a map for those of you who are more visual and like to look at maps. Districts that are on here as red, this is Suffolk County, are where districts that have between 76 and 100% of their student population as economically disadvantaged. So the vast majority of students in those districts. These are 2012-13. That's a 2012-13 map. This is what it looks like now. As you can see, we have more districts that are red. We have more districts that are darker green, which is 51 to 75%. So over half of the students in the dark green and red districts in Suffolk County those districts have students that more than half of them are qualifying as economically disadvantaged. These are Nassau numbers. Again, this is 2012-13. This is what Nassau looks like now. So Nassau County Arguably most people on Long Island would see it as a wealthy county, most people in other parts of the state as well. But there are definitely pockets and increasing pockets of student need. According to federal guidelines, approximately 37.4% of the students enrolled in Long Island school districts qualify as economically disadvantaged, and those were 2021 numbers. So let's take a look at our English language learner numbers. These are the top English language learner districts in the state, right, including New York City. So New York City has the most. That's not a surprise shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. But 4 of the districts on that list are Long Island districts. So that's across the state, including New York City. We have 4 districts on that list, and the rest of the districts on that list are really cities, either small cities or, for New York State, are larger cities. So this
The
is
English language learner. I think for those of us not in education, that might be counterintuitive. These are districts that need bilingual education, right? Not
correct.
those that have English language predominantly.
Correct. So an English language learner, yes, is somebody who comes in with a native language other than English, and so needs additional services to be able to learn in our schools, right? These are New York State school districts that have a 20% or more enrollment of English language learners. You can see the vast majority of those. We didn't just pick out Long Island districts. The vast majority of those districts, everything in red there, are Long Island districts. And this, again, just if you want to see the shifts from 2010-11 to 2021, those lines represent the increase in the number of English language learner students. The purple line there at the bottom is how this compares to the rest of the state percentage-wise. So the rest of the state, also seeing an increase, but not at the rate percentage-wise as the districts on Long Island. These are the change charts. If you just want to be able to see, what are those shifts, right? Again, vast majority of districts, this is Suffolk County, have seen 66.6% increase in the number of students who are English language learners. This is Nassau, very similar pattern, percentage is lower, but very similar pattern, 32.2% increase in the number of students who are English language learners. Long Island had 42,000, a little over 42,000 English language learners in October of 2020. That's an 18.2% of the state's total L population, including New York City. So we have a high percentage of English language learners in the state. We also take a look at students with disabilities. SWD stands for students with disabilities. And some of this is so that we can take a look at what are the needs of our students, right? Because students with higher needs need more intensive services, which of course are expensive to offer. Again, you can see all of the districts in Suffolk County. Most of those districts have seen an increase in students with disabilities. There are some that have seen a decrease, but overall, as a county, we've seen a 7.3% increase in students with disabilities in the last 8 years. These are Nassau districts, similar pattern to Suffolk. In some ways, Suffolk County is different than Nassau. In some ways, we're similar. When we're presenting to elected officials, we like to point out to folks what those differences are. So in addition to taking a look at the wealth or the needs, the financial needs, fiscal needs of our students, we also take a look at what are the financial, so we call it combined wealth ratio. So a little bit of a lesson, right? Combined, every district has a combined wealth ratio. That number is determined. I'm hearing an echo, but that combined wealth ratio is determined by taking a look at the income in the district, so the income of the residents, as well as the tax base. So that is what is used to determine what a district's combined wealth ratio number is. It shifts every year. If you are below 1, you are below the average in the state. So districts on this map that are red are below the average wealth compared to all of districts in New York State. So you can see in 2011-12, Suffolk County had a fair number of districts that were below the average in wealth, right? That's quite different, again, than most people think of Long Island. This is 21-22. So again, you can see increasing number of districts that are below the average wealth when taking a look at those factors. This is Nassau County in 11-12, and this is what they look like this year. So again, increasing number of districts that are below average wealth compared to the rest of the state. You take a look at how many students are educated in those districts. In Suffolk County, 61.4% of our students are educated in districts of below average wealth. Eastern Suffolk BOCES, which is the BOCES that I lead, almost 70% of the students in our region are in districts of below average wealth. Looks different in Nassau, right? 37.6% of the students in Nassau, so less, but overall, half of the students on Long Island are educated in districts that have below average wealth. A little bit of information about homelessness, right? We don't like to think of students on Long Island as being homeless, but in 2021, we had 4,425 students that were enrolled in our school districts that had experienced homelessness. As a comparison, there's 9,677 students who are enrolled in the rest of the state. This excludes New York City. But we have about 50% of the homeless students when you take a look at the entire state outside of New York City. Those students live on Long Island. Again, similar to when we looked at English language learner numbers, these are districts that have high level of homeless students. Some of them may be surprising, some of them may not be, but these are the top homeless districts again in the state, and 5 of them are on Long Island. So just to take a look at, Long Island low wealth districts, least wealth districts, and Long Island wealthy districts, and take a look at what are the demographics, right? This is where we see disparities come up. The pie chart on the left is our low wealth districts, and the pie chart on the right is our wealthy districts. The green numbers represent students who identify as Hispanic. And what I'm going to say mustard orange color represents students who identify as white. So in our wealthy districts, over half of the students in those districts are white. In our low wealth districts, almost 68% of them are students who identify as Hispanic. The red number there are students who identify as Black. So close to 90% of the students in our low wealth districts identify as either Black or Hispanic. So not only do we have wealth disparities, but we have ethnic disparities between our wealthy and wealth and low wealth districts as well. Let's take a look at student outcomes, right? Long Island is an island, honestly, that in so many ways outperforms the rest of the state and the students who come through our schools. There's a lot of data here, so let me just point out some high points. You have Suffolk County numbers there, Nassau counties, and Long Island, but I'm just going to focus on Long Island because this is a business association and business really crosses counties. 91.5% of the students on Long Island graduated. We're looking at it August 2020 numbers. In the rest of the state, that was 87.5%. So we outperform the rest of the state in the number of students that graduate, but probably a more important number, because Long Island schools have very high expectations for their graduates, is the 4th line down, which is Advanced Regents Diploma. So that means not only did those students receive a Regents Diploma, but they hit a whole bunch of other academic benchmarks, as well as taking a whole bunch of other Regents exams. We are at 58.4% as far as Advanced Regents Diplomas compared to the rest of the state, which was under 39%. So Long Island districts really push their students to get to that benchmark. Let's take a look at how we compare to other areas in the state, right? So Long Island, whether you're looking at the chart on the top or the bar graph on the bottom, these again are students who have an Advanced Regents Diploma. Long Island is #1 in hitting that mark. Hamilton County, which really is kind of Adirondack territory, was the lowest in the state when we rank counties, and Cortland was at the median. So the median in the state was 40, just under 41%. We are at 58.5%. So again, in comparison, doing quite well with that. Taking a look at high school graduates who enter post-secondary education, Long Island has 86% of the students who leave our high schools enter post-secondary education. We rank number 4 behind Rockland and a couple of other counties in the Hudson Valley. Delaware ranks 56 with just over half of their students going on to college. Cortland, which is at the median, had 73%. So again, Long Island outperforms most areas in the state as far as students going on to college. Let's take a look at some other things, because there are many things that happens in school other than test scores. I'm sure you probably have seen in the news Regeneron Science Talent Search. So if Long Island was a state, so if we separated from the rest of the country, and if we were a state, we would rank number 1 in the number of 2022 Regeneron semifinalists, which was 49. We were ahead of California, the entire state of California, which had 45, and actually ahead of New York State total, which had 44. 16.3% of the 2022 semifinalists identified from across the county were from Long Island. Take a look at finalists. 7 of the 40 high school seniors named finalists in this year are from Long Island. So high percentage of students in that science contest. Blue ribbon schools, it's a tremendous benchmark for a school to become a blue ribbon school. There's a lot of things that you need to be able to demonstrate and do. In 2021, 5 public Long Island high schools were awarded the blue ribbon. We've had 60 blue ribbon schools identified on Long Island in the past 21 years. This is just an example of a lot of other areas where students receive awards and are acknowledged. These are all visual arts and music, different places that students have, showcased their work in 21-22. So in the midst of a pandemic, that work was still happening. So let's talk about the cost of public education. That is a hot topic on Long Island. We all pay taxes, so we know that it can be painful. So let's take a look at how money flows, right? So if New York City is included, the share of state aid, so if you take a look at state aid to public education, the share that comes to Long Island is 12.5%. However, Long Island educates almost 16% of the state's children. So we have almost 16% of the state's children and are receiving 12.5% of the aid. Let's take a look at the state budget overall for public education. Percent change in major state operating funds. Okay, so the blue line there is school aid. As you can see, the state budget, a high percentage of it does go to school aid. You can see in 2021, that number dropped way down. That was really the intensive year of the pandemic, 21-22. That number went back up, and some of that was because we had federal funds to come in and backfill that. The red line, which went way up in 2021, was all other areas of the budget, and that was definitely skewed because of the budget money that needed to go to address pandemic issues. But you can see the blue line in public education, we're generally, going back and forth with Medicaid as far as costs. But definitely, there's no arguing that New York State budget, a good portion of it goes to fund school districts. But let's take a look at what does that mean for Long Island? So we have Long Island there, and we have the rest of the state. The yellow parts of those pie are the part of the school district revenues that come from property tax. So on Long Island, you have almost 68% of the money that funds our school districts comes from property tax levies, right? If you look at the rest of the state, not including New York City, less than half of the money that funds their school districts come from property tax. 44.2% of that comes from state aid. Whereas on Long Island, just under 26% of the money to fund our public schools comes from state aid. So our message to elected officials for many years now has been, Long Island needs its fair share of state aid. We don't get the same percentage of state aid to educate our students, and much more of the money that is supporting our districts is coming out of our pockets as opposed to coming from state aid. These are numbers, the actual numbers as opposed to the pie chart, right? So you can see total receipts from the state. Long Island is the top line there. Total receipts from the state, 30.8% comes to Long Island. 48.8% goes to the rest of the state. And then again, you see property tax levy and other revenue, 67.6% of that money on Long Island is coming from our pockets, whereas 47.9% in the rest of the state. And there are other numbers in there for folks who are number gurus and like to look at the details. So let's take a look at this. This is really important information, regional cost differences. So the regional cost difference is something that is determined in Albany. This is regional cost index. This was 2019, so it's a couple years old, but it doesn't shift much. But it takes a look at what does a public dollar buy in different areas of the state. So you can see Long Island is a region, right? So let me go to the top, the chart at the top. $1,000, right? $1,000, the purchasing power of $1,000 in the North Country, Mohawk Valley, right? So that's where a dollar buys the most. Compared to the purchasing power of Long Island, New York City, a dollar in the North Country would only buy 70.2% of the same product in Long Island and New York City. So there is regional cost differences. Now, I'm sure in the business world, this is not new information, right? If you are a McDonald's, your cost, the cost of your product shifts depending on where your McDonald's is. That's the same as far as grocery stores and other kinds of things. So, one of the things that our advocacy has done over the last 10 or 20 years is gotten the state to realize there are legitimate regional cost differences that need to be taken into account when we're taking a look at the cost of public education. The regional cost difference impact, again, purchasing power of $1,000 in the North Country and Mohawk Valley, which are the lowest cost regions in the state, is 42.5% greater than that same purchasing power of $1,000 on Long Island and in New York City. And again, the purchasing power of $1,000 in Central New York, which is the median, is 29.1% greater. So state aid dollars have less purchasing power on Long Island than in any other region of the state. So not only do we get less, but the purchasing power of those dollars is less. So let's take a look at teacher mean wages, right? People like to complain about what teachers make. So let's take a look at what they make compared to other places in the state. So the dark blue line is the actual teacher mean wages. So what the teachers actually bring home. The lighter blue line is what happens when we adjust those salaries for regional cost differences. So when you do that, the salaries are right in line with the rest of the state. When you take a look, so the dark orange line is salaries in the rest of the state. When you adjust those for regional costs, they shift a little bit, but nowhere near the adjustment that happens on Long Island. And the dark purple is New York State as well as New York State adjusted. So you can see the difference in really what a teacher wage purchases on Long Island, which is really what that is showing. So let's take a look at annual taxable sales and purchases, right? We know that we help fund the state by what we buy. So Hamilton, well, let's take a look at Long Island. We rank 56 as far as the annual taxable sales reported in thousands, 58.5 million, that's reported in thousands. So I'm thinking that means billion. Hamilton County is the lowest, not surprising. Oswego is the median. So we generate a tremendous number, a tremendous amount of annual taxable sales and purchases to support New York State. Total state income tax paid. So this is the other way that we support New York State. Long Island again, 56. So we rank the highest as far as taxes paid in thousands. Hamilton, again, is the lowest. St. Lawrence is the median. So we are supporting New York State both with our income tax paid and with the sales taxes that we pay. This is property tax paid from yearly income. Long Island is third, right behind Westchester and another area in that region. 7.92% of our annual income is paid to property taxes in Long Island, compared to some other places in the state. The low point is St. Lawrence, where they 3.25% of their annual income goes to property tax. So what do we need to reshape our future? You know, one of the things that LIMBA does really well is talks about, you know, what needs to change on Long Island, what kind of innovation things can we happen. One of the things that we certainly, so schools are a microcosm of our communities, right? You know, it's important to understand the communities that we have, right? And the students that we serve. We need to have partnerships with the business community to ensure that we're preparing students for the future of what they need, for the future of what our communities need. We need to continue to provide high quality, well-rounded educational programs because it's what draws people to Long Island. And we need sustainable funding that supports the changing needs of the future of Long Island schools. So that was lots of information. Let me stop sharing. Happy to answer any questions people might have. I know I flew through it.
My first question is, why are there more economically disadvantaged people on Long Island? Is that a comparative, or is that, you know, in absolute dollars?
That is in absolute dollars. So the criteria for determining who is economically disadvantaged is the same criteria, whether you're on Long Island or whether you're in Hamilton County, which of course means those students, those families are probably struggling more on Long Island because we now know that a dollar doesn't buy the same amount. So it is, it's the same calculation no matter where you are in the state.
Another statement you made was the disparity in state aid that we get from our region. Excuse me. That disparity does it take into consideration the amount of money that people make here? Is generally speaking more. I don't know if I phrased that properly.
Well, I think, Ernie, if I understand your question, you want to know, does the disparity in state aid, in other words, we receive 12.5% of the aid and we have more than 12.5% of the students, is that a reflection of the fact that people on Long Island are wealthier? I'm going to say that there are some elected officials that would absolutely say that and would say that that's why they have pushed money the way they have pushed money when they determine what state aid is. Part of why we look at these demographics and the shifts in those demographics is to be able to help people to understand Long Island is not the island it was 10 or 15 years ago, right? The needs of our communities are going up, the poverty of our communities are, is going up. And, it's important to understand that as, our state elected officials, because they're the ones who make determinations about state aid, understand, that Long Island is not the island that everybody thinks it is. But yes, that is absolutely why money has been dispersed in the ways that it has been dispersed. One other caveat, right? I talked about county-wide numbers and I talked about island-wide numbers. In reality, we have districts that are quite wealthy and we have districts with tremendous amount of needs. So some of the key of state aid flow is making sure it's going to the districts that need it most. But those changing demographic numbers, all of our districts have increasing students in poverty. All of them have increasing, English language learners. Both of those things bring you students who have higher needs.
I would say it might have been 50 years ago that I was writing letters about the impoverishment, not of the students, but of the teachers. They were not being paid enough money. that argument can no longer be made. I think they make a decent living at this point. I hope you agree with that. But the way they get paid is it's a hodgepodge. I can move from one district to another as a teacher and make more money by making that move. Shouldn't the union be looking for a unified wage? And the reason why I think that's important and beneficial is that they wouldn't be competing for teachers in poor districts. They would get the same quality in poor districts as they do in richer districts. Am I misconstruing that whole thought, or what?
So what you're saying is accurate. People can go from one district to the other and make a different amount of money. The problem is unions are district specific. So every district has its own union, which means, that union negotiates salaries, and they've got collective bargaining agreements that are specific to that district. So, that would be a huge mountain to move. There is a state level, New York State United Teachers, but that's not a union and that doesn't negotiate salaries. Salaries are all locally negotiated.
To move. But you know what? What else is moving is people out of the district because they can't afford it. And now that you have to balance that detrimental effect on the general economy with a little equity in how this is done. And I think it's the responsibility, and I'm not picking on you, Julie, or the profession, because I've always supported the profession. But, I don't expect you to give me a positive on that because, you represent the education itself. But I'd like everybody to think about that.
Yeah. So first of all, I take no offense to that. One of the things, I didn't put the slide up here, but one of the things that we also do is compare the wages of teachers on Long Island compared to other positions that require the same amount of education. And teacher salaries are in line, if not slightly lower.
Well, I have no problem with that, but
Yeah.
they should be a little more homogenized.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So we have
Al
some
Vitters-
questions. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Lynn, were you going to say the same thing I was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Al Vitters had a question in the chat. So Al, I've unmuted you so you can ask your question.
Yeah, I enjoyed the presentation and I hope Albany is listening or at least has heard your presentation. I'm just wondering if any of your data derives from the recent census data, because I've heard reports where Blacks and Hispanics were significantly undercounted in that curtailed census.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for the question. One of the things on the bottom of all of that charts is where all of those charts is where our data come from. Districts are responsible to report the race ethnicity of their students. So we grab our data from New York State Education Department verified databases, which is why, some of it's not 21, 22 data because that hasn't been verified yet, but it doesn't come from census. This particular data does not come from census data.
I had a quick question, Julie. Did these demographic shifts that you're seeing here on Long Island, how do they compare to national demographic shifts? Are they similar, different? And if so, how different?
That's a good question. And we haven't looked at that data. So let me tell you, the challenge of looking at data, right? Use data to tell a story, and that, well, so let me go back to something that's probably easier to understand, right? Let's talk about the last presidential election, right? People took a look at states and how states voted. When you really zoom in and take a look at how voting really happened, or if you zoomed in to take a look at how, what student need is, you see that it might look one way as a state, but when you zoom in, there's a lot of, there's not the, the consistency that you see. I mean, it is like this organization has been talking for years about the fact that, middle class, upper middle class folks are moving off of Long Island and moving to places in the country that are more affordable. And, it's no secret that part of that is the cost of living on Long Island, which is driven by taxes, and, taxes go up when you have a lot of services, right? Whether that be amazing roads, whether that be amazing schools, amazing sewers, whatever those services are. Of course, once people have those things, they don't want to give them up. They don't want to pay for them, but they don't want to give them up. So the cost of living is high. Students get amazing education here. They're able to go out and get amazing jobs. As we know, many of them are not staying here. So, part of our message to Albany, and it's consistent with the message of our organization, is, Long Island is an important part of the state. It has a lot of potential as far as an economic driver for the state, but we need to make it an affordable place to live for the late 20 and 30-year-old students who are, finishing college and perhaps want to stay where they grew up. So things like affordable housing, things like, the right percentage of support from Albany, so that the taxpayers on Long Island are not paying a disparate amount out of our own pockets for the schools that are here. So, but listen, there are upstate schools, many upstate schools, right, that don't offer what Long Island schools offer. So we are getting what we pay for in the way of, number of AP courses, number of sports teams, all of those things. And those are hard decisions, right? Our community is going to want to say, okay, I don't really want that anymore. I don't want that for our children anymore because I'd rather pay less money. So that's, once people have any kind of a benefit, they don't like to give it up. So.
We have a question from Dennis Duffy.
I'd like to refer to what the point that Ernie raised before about providing enough money through state aid to poorer districts so they can afford to hire quality personnel. And it's my understanding that that was the whole original reason for state aid in the first place. Now it has taken on some color of an attempt to lower property or keep property taxes lower than they would otherwise be. And I think that explains why, since Long Island as a whole is wealthier than the rest of the state, we're always going to get back less than the rest of the state because the rest of the state on average is poorer. So to argue that we have 18% of the students and we only get 15% of the aid is, or to observe that, is to simply observe that the formula is doing what it was intended to do to some extent. Whether it's close enough or not is another question.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there is a foundational formula that drives state aid to schools. It's called the foundation formula. Not a lot of creativity there. And it drives more aid to poorer schools. So drives less aid, obviously, to the higher wealth districts on Long Island. You're absolutely right, Dennis. There's a lot of poverty in other places in New York State. But what I would say is when you take a look, so that combined wealth ratio number is a good comparison, right? So a combined wealth ratio of 0.2. And we have districts on Long Island that might be at a 0.3. So we have districts here that are every bit as poor as some upstate districts. One of the differences, interestingly, is our large districts are our poor districts, whereas upstate, the poorest districts are small rural districts. So there are a lot of need across the state. And, I don't think anybody would argue send more money to a high wealth districts. It would be, we need some recognition that we have large, very poor wealth districts here. I will also say this, the 21-22 budget, so the state budget to fund schools in this particular school year, finally funneled money to some of those poor districts. And the proposal we have on the table for funding for schools for next year, same thing. So, it came out in a way that is trying to bridge a gap that some of those poor districts have seen. So, but yeah, your point is very well taken. There's tremendous poverty in upstate New York, and what their schools are able to offer are reflected by that.
I'd like to make one observation about the combined wealth ratio. Much of your statistics used medians. The combined wealth ratio doesn't use medians, it uses averages. So if you're so unfortunate to have a billionaire move in next door to you, that raises the average income of your community tremendously. And so you get less state aid. So in order to make this a little fairer, perhaps we should be looking at calculating the combined wealth ratio using medians as opposed to the absolute numbers for income and for property wealth.
Yeah, we don't do those calculations. Those numbers come out from the state. But your point is well taken, and that has happened, right? You have a lottery winner, or you happen to have a hedge, a really successful hedge fund person living in your district, definitely skews what the wealth of your district looks like.
Yeah, and the last thing is I have no idea why my screen looks the way it does. They asked Frank for help, but he's never
Sort of
seen
new wave, yeah, I don't know.
This is really strange. I think Ernie did it. Thank you.
Now, I love you, Dennis.
Julie, I'm curious, and I think, I guess I might as well just, so on the federal level, I know we're all familiar with the idea that our representatives can fight for their share of the pork, and that states often benefit by legislators that bring home. How much is that happening in Albany? Does some of this disparity lay at the feet of our state assembly and legislatures?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, which is why, and somebody said, is Albany listening, or we hope you're speaking to Albany. I mean, we advocate frequently for Albany. We do a similar presentation to our Long Island elected officials, help them there's a lot that they need to understand, so education is only a piece of it, although it's a big piece of the New York state budget pie. So it is something they pay attention to. So yeah, there is a lot of them advocating for Long Island as an island, and they do tend to, even across sides of the aisle, they do tend to advocate as a team for for state aid to schools for Long Island.
Comment there from Lisa, and I was wondering if she wants to articulate that or flesh it out a little bit more.
Well, I was just, looking at the increase in the economically disadvantaged students, and if the aid stays at the same % below the even number of students for the state, I feel like the balloon's going to burst at some point, right? And the quality of the education, if the aid stays the same, and the quality of education will reduce, and it seems like this downward spiral. So as the quality of education reduces, if the taxes stay this high, we don't get increased aid, more families are going to leave. Families are already leaving, young families, and I feel like that may increase. Are your efforts talking to the politicians? Are we making any traction in moving that to a higher % of aid based on those wonderful, excellent statistics we shared today? I just wonder if there's been any sign of movement, because I think Long Island is at risk of really being different in 10 years, 10 to 15 years. It'll be very different in terms of the quality of education and the families.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. We've been actually doing this work probably for 20 years. At one point, the percentages were 12% of the aid and 17% of the students. So, and I know that doesn't sound like a lot when we now are at 13.5, and I don't remember what the number was, 15 something %, but when you're talking about the size of Long Island and the amount of money that comes to Long Island, absolutely, we've seen the shift. Don't like to see the shift of students moving out, but we definitely, the advocacy has made a difference, and some of that really is helping people understand the shifting demographics, and listen, those families, that's not news to any of us, right? That our communities look different than they used to. And as a business world, some of our work is making sure that our policies and practices and businesses, are supporting, not supporting, but are set up in a way to allow those folks to be successful. And, same with schools, right? We need to be in a position to make sure that, those students graduate and are able to go out and, be successful in communities. We would love for them to be able to stay here and be successful here. But the most important thing is to help elected officials understand, the needs here are different and are shifting. So yes, we have seen a shift in the way aid is distributed.
Oh, that's
Julia, I think I know the answer to this intuitively, being a lifelong Long Islander, but maybe you have some numbers. What impact does private education have on Long Island to this whole picture?
So I don't have numbers. I will say anecdotally, and I'm going to talk private parochial, right? Anecdotally, we've seen the closure of a lot of particularly, Catholic parochial schools. I don't know as we've seen an increase in private school education, but we have some strong private schools here that are probably maintaining numbers. I mean, that money obviously comes out of parents' pockets. So some parents can afford, to pay for that kind of education. Some parents can't. So I think as the economy shifts, we probably see that kind of shift. But the number of students in private and parochial schools is diminutive compared to the number of students in public ed.
And unlike a lot of areas across the country.
Yeah.
Julie, I had a quick question about technology. And it's probably very broad, but maybe you could speak to this. Can Long Island school districts be using technology more effectively to decrease the gap, the learning gap between these lower economically challenged areas and the wealthier ones? I mean, how does technology affect that, and how can we be more effective at using that to assist?
Good question. So first of all, schools have learned so much about technology and the effective and efficient use of it for education. And the good lessons learned are going to continue to be used, right? How do we level the playing field and what we're able to bring into classrooms to prepare students. So that is absolutely happening. The other thing, like disparities in healthcare that became very apparent during the pandemic, were disparities in access to technology. Right. So school districts, when we were required to go remote in the spring of 2020, school districts shifted very quickly and worked to get students access to devices. But the problem is you can have a device, but if you don't have connectivity, it's a problem. So, the state has put forth a requirement, schools were required to assess access to technology, both connectivity and devices for all of their staff and families. And we're on a trajectory to reduce disparities there. So it's really two things. It's access, but then it's also like what high quality education can we bring in that we couldn't before, because you can now do it virtually, right? So lots of, hard lessons learned during the pandemic, but really good lessons learned as well.
Well, I'm wondering how that virtual, we've always had this traditional idea that teachers teach in a local school, right? But technology has now proven that we can have a teacher who's from a superior school, who maybe is a better teacher, now teach across multiple districts. Is anything like that being discussed, or are big changes like that to the model not on the radar yet?
So I will say, and we wouldn't say a superior teacher, teaching.
Well, yeah.
I understand. And I think that really is a mindset, but it's really more about, can that small district offer, AP physics, and they couldn't before, because you can have one AP physics teacher teaching the class to 3 small districts. So that's, that's the kind of thinking that is happening, because we realized, even though it's important for kids to have face-to-face time with teachers, we've learned to do virtual teaching well, and it does opens a path for more types of courses that maybe couldn't be offered.
I wanted to ask you something that's really within your wheelhouse, which is the training of people with manual skills. And I know that your operation has done quite a bit of that, and has done it relatively successful from what I can see. I came from a neighborhood where most of the fathers in the community were craftspeople. They were either carpenters or plumbers or whatever. And, the children grew up having a decent living because they knew how to do that, even if they didn't go to college. Don't you, now I know this is what you've been doing, but do you think you're doing it enough and making that emphasis enough to get those children who are not privileged as my children were, and probably everybody on the screen children were? Do you feel like you're doing enough, and is there more you can do?
So what Ernie is referring to is our career and technical education classes that we offer through our Long Island Academy. We have probably about 2,000 students that come to us every day to learn, to be involved in a career training program. I will also say 80 to 90% of those students go on to college, right? So this, expectation that, they're not college bound is absolutely not the case. In fact, all of our courses are required to have an agreement in place with an institute of higher ed to give them a leg up to get into that college or university or trade school. So are we doing enough? I will say those numbers are increasing, and that, what we see those numbers shift for 2 reasons. One, as districts, as the economy improves, students will come to those programs to get educated, right? So our heating, ventilation, air conditioning students, many of them have job offers before they leave. Same with welding. These are 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are getting trained and have job offers while they're in our programs, and certainly, by the time they're ready to graduate high school. Carpentry programs, trade electric programs, a lot of others, right? We have physical therapy. We have a lot of medical training programs for high schoolers. Some districts have their own internal programs. I would argue many of them are not quite as robust as, a 2-year program for students who are coming to our Long Island Academy. But districts, more and more students, I think, are seeing the benefit of those programs and making a decision to come. Some of it is Long Island has a long history of a mindset that success is graduation from high school and going to a 4-year university, right? So there is a hurdle that some of these students need to jump over to get into a BOCES program, more so in some districts than others. And it's really a mindset, right? Is what does success look like? And I was on a call the other day, and one of our elected officials, who happens to be a supporter of career and tech ed, said, listen, we have students who are leaving college with $300,000 in college debts. And we have other students that are, graduating from a 2-year, technical program and walking out and having a 6-figure salary, in their early 20s. So what messages are we sending?
And myself both had the benefit of having employers that would pay for our education if we were, a viable student. And I see corporate America walking away from that opportunities to educate, and that's a damn shame. And I was wondering how we can collectively get on their case.
Was that a question?
No.
Sorry.
You can't solve all the problems in the world, Julie.
I just wanted to make a comment about what you just said, Julie. I completely agree and feel it. I have a junior in high school right now, and the pressure to find like top level 4-year school that to get into and for us to afford it. It's stressing both of us out a lot. And I'd say there's definitely, like you said, this view that, oh, if you go to BOCES, you're not going to get the college education, you're not going to be as successful. And I don't even know how to begin to start to discuss that there are other options. But I even see it like within the school and the course selection process. There's extreme pressure for these kids to take every AP available. And I when she started high school, I was like, you don't have to do that. Like, why would you take your college courses in high school? Take 1 or 2. You don't have to make yourself crazy. And she doesn't want to. I mean, she's an excellent student, but I think the kids are being pressured to take 4 and 5 APs. And then I just wonder if there's any analysis on the mental health of these students. They're so stressed out. And then we
Yeah.
go to college tours, and the colleges talk about, well, we're going to compare your course selection to the available courses. So now, because we live on Long Island and we pay high taxes and we have availability of all these AP courses, we have to make ourselves crazy, because if we don't, we won't get into those top level schools.
Right.
So it's very stressful. I don't know how to improve the whole.
Right. So I have such strong feelings about this. So I'm the mother of 3 20-something-year-old daughters, right? One of my daughters came to one of our programs, one of our career and tech ed programs, culinary hospitality. She went to college for hospitality management. She is presently an assistant general manager at a Marriott in Jackson, making about $60,000 with potential for a $25,000 a year bonus. Right, that's pretty good money for somebody, somebody with a 4-year college degree. She went to a college that trains in technical skills. But one of my other daughters, piled up on APs, went to college, had 27 credits waived when she got there. So that is a benefit, right? And took a different path. So this is the thing. They're both viable pathways. And I will also say, that older daughter had to battle guidance counselor who said, you're not BOCES material. And luckily she had a mother who worked for BOCES, and she was willing to have that conversation, right? But there is a tremendous amount of pressure. This is what I say to juniors and seniors, and of course they don't listen to me. They say, could you tell my parents? I don't really think it matters what university or college you go to, right? I do think that a 4-year degree gives you a leg up in employment because it says perseverance, right? It says persistence. It says some level of intellect. But I mean, when we hire people, and we have 2,400 employees here, right? I care less about where they went to school than about the fact that they went to school. So it's hard, Lisa. I mean, it's about you and your husband and your child thinking, what do you want to do, right? First of all, what do you want to do, right? And then let's take a look at what pathway you're in. Does it help you do what you want to do? Like, if you want to be an attorney,
Julie, do you know what you want to do?
well, and that's the other thing, people will say 17 and 18-year-olds don't know what they want to do. And I said, but listen, they know what they're good at, and they know what they enjoy, right? So what you're good at and what you enjoy should drive your path to a career, right? If you want to be an attorney and you happen to have innate skills that, would make you good at that, don't come to a BOCES program, because it's not a good path. Right, pile up on your APs and look for a prestigious university. If you want to be a teacher, pile up on your APs and look for a college or university that has a strong teacher prep program. The thing that aggravates me the most, and I'm sure it's going to annoy some of you, is when I ask people why they're going to college and they tell me to play lacrosse or to play soccer. My message to all of my children was figure it out before you get there, because I'm not paying for you to figure out what you want to be when you're in college. And I walk them through that process. Let's talk about what you're good at. Let's talk about what you enjoy. I can say that the senior meetings with the guidance counselors were a little tense, and my children would whisper, "Stop it, Mom." But I've been doing this a long time, and I knew what was a good fit for them. That being said, they've all chosen very different career fields, and that's okay.
Hey, Julie, Sean Dunn. I work for National Grid. I do just have, one thing to say. I think this is an excellent presentation. So thank you for putting this together. But I feel when students are in high school, there's not much preparation for them to figure out where they can go and what they can do. How much of the school districts are really pushing them in that route? Are there classes to get them ready for college or get them ready for careers in general? I think that's the important step that we're missing. There's a lot of education, but not so much education on the education itself and how to go about certain careers and pathways to get, to X or to get to Y.
Well, didn't you used to call that guidance?
Yeah. So really good question, Sean. So I will say, this is what happens in a lot of districts is when kids become juniors and some districts seniors, right? That's when they get access to guidance, right? And the guidance, which is way too late, right? Needs to happen in middle school. Some districts do have kindergarten to 12th grade, program software to help kids kind of, track over the course of those years. What are their interests? What are they good at? I will also say several years ago, because the pandemic really has shifted my sense of when things were implemented, but the state put in a requirement to have guidance counseling kindergarten through 12th grade with the goal of doing that having that conversation early, and put requirements in guidance counselor training programs that guidance counselors know how to do that. I will say that's a huge shift, and we're still in the midst of that shift, because guidance counselors, to have them understand how you help a 5, a 6, an 8, a 10-year-old, understand what career path they need to be on, that's a big learning curve. But the state recognizes that that's important, Sean, and they're, trying to shift a monolithic system to be able to do that better.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that, and I think it's important to note that a lot of these households have one, parent families, right? And if they do have 2-parent families, most of them are working full time. So the support, unfortunately, isn't there when you need it at all times. So for these students growing up in an atmosphere such as that, I think it's just important for them to understand, their skill sets, what they can do, what they can accomplish, and how they can get there. And not that they need to know exactly what they're doing, at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, but options and things that they can pursue in school and outside of school to kind of get to that place.
Yeah, that's vitally important. Yeah.
But go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to point out that we're 10 minutes over.
I know. I apologize for that.
No, thank you. It was an excellent presentation.
No, and the conversation was necessary to flesh out what you did. So we really don't have any problem with being a little overtime. But I think if we have no more questions in the box, we'll close. What do we got, Frank?
Well, I think it's very important to mention that the next meeting will not be virtual.
Yeah. It won't. Hold on, let me grab my.
It's going to be at the Caithness plant in Yaphank. You'll get details in the email letters. But we're going to have Ross Ain being the presenter on that. He is the president of the company, and he'll be showing us around the technology that plant represents. It's amazing technology. I've been there, And, they produce electricity so efficiently that they're more competitive than anything that exists on this island. So they get to sell about 95% of their capacity all month long, all year long. So it's going to be a great presentation. I know I've been there before. So we look forward to that. Then I spoke to the Frank Bell Bolton with New York, the Ducks, and that will be an in-person thing too. I don't know what the date is on that. I have to call back today and get the date on that. And that's a wonderful venue that Frank Bolton and his partners have put together. So we're looking forward to that. Frank, do we have anything that I missed?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I'll just say, check the website for the details on directions and everything to the Caithness plant. We are gonna offer a networking at 8:30 at that meeting. So if anybody wants to get there a little early and mill around, that would be great. Love to see some people in person.
All right, I want to thank everybody for participating in this meeting this morning, and especially Julie for making that very detailed presentation and stirring up a lot of interesting questions that help us all understand the environment that we live in this education that we're providing for our children. And so thank you all, and I'll see you in 3 weeks.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.